Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dojo Talks. Today, we are talking about the most influential books throughout chess history. What that means is not necessarily the most popular books, or the best books, but rather the books that we feel had the most influence in terms of ideas and otherwise, how we think about the game. So we're in for a real battle today. We're gonna go at it, and I just want to say one quick thing before we start. Obviously, it's a little bit subjective, but especially David and I are from the last millennium, and so from a time where the culture of the text dominated. Now we are in the culture of the digital age, and it's a completely different world. A lot of young, very talented players aren't even using books anymore, and so we can also think about the development, let's say, of chess tools. As an example, I'll use ChessBase that really came to the fore in the 90s. But something interesting to think about those tools is it's not like there's ideas in there that are then being expressed. It's just a way to organize your own, let's say, games, your own openings, to look at what other people played, right? So all those things are important, but we're going to be focusing on the books themselves. And we have this little slithering thing that we're going to start at 5 and then snake through it. We're allowed to change our minds. And also, I should say, at the end, we might, if there's books that haven't been mentioned at all that should have been, we'll probably come back and just give some honorable mentions there. Sound good, guys?
Yeah, actually, that's another good topic, is like the top 5 chess tools. It's like
top 5 chess tools. Yeah.
That would be good. That would be a good ranking, or like a tier. I like tier lists. I think tier lists are cool. But yeah, as usual, we hope not to offend anyone with our lists. It is just our opinion, even though things sometimes get heated. And we should try to make this podcast friendly. So we'll try to announce our picks vocally. But yeah, if you want to see our chart, you got to go to the YouTube video to kind of watch it, because then we're going to average everything out at the end. But yeah, should be fun.
I had a heck of a time winnowing this list, so I'm glad that Jesse's allowing some honorable mentions, because I feel like I'm going to snub some really big books otherwise.
Yeah. I've got some mentions for sure.
Yeah.
Should we start? I feel like we should start with, well, someone should start with their number 5, but I would give my mentions with the number 5 pick.
Oh, well, but let's do it at the end, because maybe someone will mention we'll put one of your books out there.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
Also, it'll reveal which books are not going to be
Fair.
your top pick at the end.
Fair.
You know, if we know that Kasparov's something or other is an honorable mention.
That's true. Actually, I was gonna drop some bombs in my honorable mentions. Yeah. Good point. Okay.
So I guess we're going to slither, and I'm going to be first. Is that what's going on?
Let's do it.
Okay. So this book. So let's just. Chess literature goes back incredibly far. There's a rumor out there, actually. I haven't done the research to confirm this, but that beyond the Bible, like the chess is one of the ones that's been the most published, and it was also among the first books published. So like we're talking 1500s already, we have literature going back that far. A problem for early chess was the notation system, early chess books. They were using insane things where they would actually write out like queen, knight, 5 to whatever, it's just incredibly tedious. And so, in Fisher's time, they were using descriptive, which I find tedious. I've learned to do it, but now so we should just be thankful that we now have this algebraic thing, which makes things simpler. In any case, here I go. I'm talking too long. I'm going to say 300 Schachpartien, so 300 chess games by Tarash. I want to put his name in there because other people won't know who the dude is. Tarash. And this book is something I discovered kind of late in life. Kasparov talked about it. Other people have talked about it. So I think for that generation, coming up, so it would have been Alekhine, Capablanca, Lasker. This was the book that I don't know, Lasker's actually a little, but kind of contemporary of Taras's, but this is the book of that generation, which defined chess writing, I think, and the way I think it happened was it's very well written, it's cogent, it's easy to follow. When you look at the book, The Ink War, those guys like Steinitz and stuff, dude, they were publishing unintelligible analysis. So what chess games did, 300 chess games, was it presented a high level of chess, well written, at times funny, and with kind of a deep but cogent analysis. So not forever variations, but giving you a sense of when to stop, like White's winning here, or White has a nice attack, or something like that. And so I know a lot of people haven't even heard of that book, but I'm going to say that was definitely one of the big ones, and maybe it should even be higher.
Okay. Yeah. I'll be honest. I haven't read it. I have heard of it.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I'll take your word for it that it's influential.
I've read it. I think my sense was that it was a pretty famous book, 20, 30 years ago when people mostly read books to get better at chess. Now that might not be one of the top 3 or 4 things people do, but
yeah,
back then it was really big and people knew about this book.
What level would you put it for, Jesse? Like if it was in our program?
I mean, first of all, I enjoyed it. I read it as a GM or whatever, but you could put it 1800, 1900 would be a good cohort for it.
That's funny. I was going to say 1800, but it could be, plus or minus 200 points from there.
Sure. I mean, it's one of these books that you could read at a variety of levels. Like I said, very accessible. And I think that's one of the things to understand about the book, in which it influenced other books. Is like, oh, we need to make this accessible, easy to read. That Steinitz stuff, when he's writing about his squabbles with Anderson, not user-friendly. Not user-friendly, very hard to follow.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I didn't even know Steinitz had. He wrote some books.
He wrote a book about. David actually mentioned the New York 1889 tournament, but he also was writing loads of articles.
Yeah, he wrote mostly articles, but he did publish 2 chess books, as well as a weird pamphlet about life while he was in a mental institution.
Gotcha. Okay, cool.
Okay. Jesse, let me apologize in advance.
Oh, no.
If my way of doing this upsets you.
Oh, no.
Just apologize in advance.
Here we go.
Sometimes I think myself all the way into some like really strange place that you wouldn't get if you didn't think for a long time. So maybe it's long think, wrong think.
Yeah.
But
go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. I mean, like when I first went into this, I had an idea of which books I was going to put, and they're not the books that I'm putting, with one exception. There's only one of these 5 books that I was planning to put in my top 5, and I really thought myself into like a weird place. The first direction I came from was I thought, what are the books that have been the most read, right? The most sold, the most copies out there in people's hands. That's like a version of influence, right? If everybody's read the thing. But then I went on this crazy goose hunt, and it turns out you can't find how much any book has been sold. The only evidence, that I could find, and I found an article by this historian Winter, right?
Okay, yeah.
Where he wrote about it. And basically, for him, almost the only sources he could find was people self-reporting how much they claimed their book had sold.
Yeah.
Right? So basically, they know from their own royalties checks from their publisher or something like that, but there's not like a list published somewhere. And obviously, I mean, you could question the veracity of people's claims, right? So there are many, many books that he had examples of where the author claimed that their book was the best-selling book of all time, which they couldn't all be true. And why is everybody claiming that? Well, I guess they've got an incentive to claim it, right?
Yeah.
So for example, a book that's in the Dojo program, Chess by Laszlo Polgar.
Right.
Well, Susan tweeted that actually she wrote the book, not her dad, and it's the second best-selling book of all time.
Yeah.
Right?
Don't trust anything she says.
What's that?
Don't trust anything that woman says.
Exactly. We have no idea if that's true or not, right? No idea. Maybe it's going to be really influential just because of the Dojo training program is going to boost its role in the chess culture even more. Who knows? Big book. But I went down that path and I found it like unsatisfying. Like I didn't feel like I could get robust enough info to be like, yeah, this is it, boys. Like this book was read by 2 million people. No other book was. That's my number one. So I sort of had to give up on that eventually. And I went more with actually like a system of what books had an influence on chess book culture and then led to more and more books, right?
Right.
So for example, I know you at some point were maybe thinking about books like The 7 Deadly Chess Sins by Rouse, something like that in our program. Great book, right? So my 5th book is kind of a predecessor to that, right? And I'm using a system where like if I can, I go to like the predecessor book. So even if more people read Chess for Zebras or 7 Deadly Chess Sins, we're going with Think Like a Grandmaster by Kotov. And my thinking here is that basically this is the first book that I know of that's kind of getting at thought process and how you think about yourself and your brain within chess, as opposed to just like, here's where a piece should be well placed, right? A whole book about like, how are we thinking? And to me, that makes that book kind of like the predecessor, the great predecessor, the ancient grandmother or grandfather of other books about self-improvement, self-analysis, chess thought process, etc.
Okay, yeah.
To this book's credit, you probably hate this choice less than some of my other ones. To this book's credit, it has a certain currency in the chess community. Like people have heard this title and it's sort of like vaguely up there, and the idea of like having like a branch of analysis and a tree of analysis with branches on it comes from there, and most experienced chess players have somehow heard those concepts. At the same time, there's like criticism, like where some people say nobody actually thinks like the thought process that he describes in that book, period. Not grandmasters, not anybody.
Yeah.
So, but again, we're not talking about what's a good book. I think this book has a lot of influence, and I feel less worried about this choice than some of my other ones.
Okay, good. I thought you were gonna say something crazy like Philidor, dude. I thought for sure you were gonna bring back Philidor.
Yeah, I thought so too, man. When I went into this, I thought so for sure.
All right, Kostya.
So I guess for me, when I was thinking about influential chess books, I was just thinking about books that have influenced maybe the most number of players, just in terms of their chess or how they approach the game. I think there's a lot of books that could be on this list, and these necessarily aren't like the best books that I would recommend like everyone should read all the time, no matter what. But to me, I feel like these are kind of the most influential. Okay, so number 5 for me, let me bring up our sheet, is gonna be Silman's Reassess Your Chess. And I feel like this book, along with like Silman's other books, like The Amateur Mind, people really like as well. I think it's the most modern book I have on my list. And for me, it feels like it's really affected the way people think about chess and chess strategy. It's definitely helped me personally, especially with the framework of like imbalances and being able to evaluate a position based on like different aspects of it. And I think it's given a lot of like club players and tournament players like a language to discuss chess strategy that, the book, I think, a couple decades old at this point, like there's been new editions, but like now I feel like a lot of the common terms and like stuff from that book is definitely stuff that we use in our chess. I definitely use it like in my chess teaching when I'm working with people, and so yeah, for me it felt like it's had a huge influence.
Was that like the first person to write about chess in terms of imbalances? Was this an invention of Silman's to some extent, or?
I'm not really sure. I mean, I feel like he was the first to use the term. I feel like the concept has been around beforehand.
Right. To some extent, people have understood for a long time, like, oh, I've got the bishop pair or something, right? Or I've got like a mobile pawn majority. But
yeah,
maybe
exactly.
he started the instructional version of teaching students in terms of the concept.
I think, yeah, he really kind of, broke it down kind of concept by concept. We definitely have known for a while, like I remember reading like some Soviet manuals about the idea of like, you know, if you have a dynamic advantage, you have to act quickly. If you have a static advantage, you can play slowly. This, I think, is also like very similar and very related. But yeah, with Silman, like he breaks it down, like good knight versus bad bishop, playing against pawn weakness, playing with the open file and this kind of thing. And yeah, I think his work has definitely done quite a bit for helping you know, club players, lower level players kind of understand the game a bit better.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He also brought like a really good hands-on teacher kind of skill to his writing, right? Where not all great chess writers necessarily had the same kind of teaching experience.
Right.
Yeah, very, very accessible. Yeah, also a great book. Yeah, also a very nice book. I think this was on my list of best classic chess books, although I don't remember now. I should have reviewed that one, so I'm pretty sure it was on there.
Could have been.
But yeah. Okay, I guess I'll do my number 4.
Yes.
And I'm just putting the years in here just because it's mildly interesting just to look at it and see what years are coming from. You know, yeah.
Yeah.
So that was 1986. All right, yeah. Next
1986. Book. Wow. Okay, maybe it's not the most modern book on the list.
It's older than you, Kostya.
That's funny. Okay, so my number 4 is going to be Kasparov. And I'm not really sure which book to put on here. Like, I feel like My Great Predecessors is a series that has been mentioned a lot by a lot of like modern grandmasters as books that were very useful for them. Personally, but I also feel like in terms of Kasparov's influence and maybe like The Test of Time is also kind of a relevant book. So I'm not really sure which book I'm putting in at number 4. I'm just gonna like put Kasparov.
No, no. You gotta choose one, buddy.
All right, I'll do My Great Predecessors then, because I haven't really read Test of Time. I just kind of assumed that his ideas are in there.
They are.
Okay, great. So I'll put MGP then, because, yeah. But anyway, so Kasparov's influence, of course, he had tremendous influence as a player in terms of his influence on like chess, like knowledge and understanding. I feel like he was really the guy that's like kind of the first one to really use computers in a very serious way when it came to like preparation, like opening preparation, and he was the first one to like use ChessSpace professionally, and like he took a very deep approach to his openings. He took a very deep approach to his analysis. You can see that deep approach in My Great Predecessors, although I don't really recommend for people to like read through like the reams and reams of computer analysis. You at least get an idea of like, okay, this is kind of what he contributed. And nowadays, of course, I mean, we're, to this day, we're kind of all still using ChessBase and using it for our openings and like following the Kasparov approach. And you definitely see it at the top level. Like players are just insanely well prepped when it comes to the World Championship or like candidates. They just got tons and tons of analysis, and that's a big part of their game. And I think Kasparov was kind of the guy that brought that influence, as far as I understand. I wasn't like totally around for that. So yeah, whether that credit goes to like Test of Time or like My Great Predecessor, like I'm not really sure. But okay, again, with MGP, I think it's a great series of books. I personally really like them a lot. I've also, again, heard a number of like strong like modern grandmasters like mention this series maybe on like different podcasts and stuff as being just like very useful for them personally, like in their chess development. So yeah.
So if your book not only influences a lot of people, but influences the people who are the next generation's grandmasters, they go out there and their influence on the rest of the chess world is outsized as well.
Yeah, I would say so.
Yeah.
I always want to say one word to Test of Time because it's a beautiful book, but it's not on my list. And so, Test of Time, written pre-computer, completely a pre-computer book. I actually had the honor of having dinner with Kasparov once. I got to talk to him about it. He said he had to write it on this old, like, East German typewriter and stuff, dude. Anyways, that book, because it was published out of the Soviet Union, it just never got the play it deserved. It just didn't get. And even today, if you go search for that book, hundreds and hundreds of dollars to find a copy of that book. So I think it's a great book, but because it didn't penetrate into the broader marketplace, its ideas didn't have the ability to be accessible to a lot of people. So that's why, for me, it didn't become influential. So to me, it's kind of an interesting test case to think about this list because while Test of Time is one of the greatest books ever written, in my opinion, it can't be called influential because it never got out of the gate. And a lot of books, not just in chess, have that problem.
Yeah. I was just in a used bookstore last week and picked up Fighting Chess.
There you go.
Yeah. So, cool. Very old little book here as well. Pretty computer. Okay, well, Kostya, just like you hesitated with which book to use for Kasparov, I actually, on my fifth one, I thought of two different books of Kotov's. I'd also thought of the Soviet School of Chess. Because I was trying to get at something that I was thinking about, like, what's something that sort of built the whole story and myth and narrative of this massive school of chess that went on for, world domination for 50 years, 55, 60 years. So I actually hesitated between those two as well.
Oh, there you go.
On that author. Okay. Now, I think Kotov was a big fan of the next guy I've got. And this is going to be... actually, I didn't even, grab the exact title for it. But maybe one of you can correct me on it. But Alyekhin's collection of his own best games. Did he just call it My Best Games? And then the years, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Alekhine's best games.
Yeah. Oh, should I write Alekhine's best games?
No, I don't know.
I recall the different volumes having the years on them, but to me, this is sort of the it's my original book of the collection of your own games, right? It's a predecessor to my 60 memorable games or Fighting Chess, which I have right here. Kasparov is maybe one of my 2 or 3 favorite chess authors, right? But I think now a really great genre of chess book that you can find is Gelfand's best games by Gelfand, Kramnik's best games by Kramnik, et cetera, on down the line, right? One of my favorite genres of books, and Alyekhin's is the oldest one that I really know of and resonates with me. I don't know how much it sold. But I know also that he was important in this story and creation of the story and narrative around Soviet chess, right? Along with the lionization of Chigorin, but that was, reaching back to the past for roots. But Alyekhin was really there at the beginning of it. So.
Yeah, it's a good choice.
Oh.
And I didn't put a date on that one because it's actually kind of hard to find the date, and I think it was published at various dates. So I'm just going to leave I'm going to leave that one without a date, unless you can find something you find satisfying.
I mean, we could say it's probably between 1938 and 1940.
But he does. I mean,
Like,
it's in 5 volumes. I don't even know if anyone has all 5 volumes. I thought it was 3 volumes, and I just looked it up, and I realized, oh my God, there's 5.
there's different editions. I would say
Yeah.
it was published, before World War II, or um, but after he played his world championship matches. So
Okay, so my number 4 is already, this is the first repeat, and that's going to be Reassess Your Chess, Silman. And I just want to say a couple things about that book that weren't already mentioned, and that is just simply that it's a big deal to me when somebody writes a book and they have certain phrases or ideas, and then I hear those phrases again and again, both in conversation and in other books. So phrases like the tall pawn, for the bishop, things like that he brought into the vocabulary of chess players. So chess players started talking in a certain way because of this book. And I think also to be mentioned about this book is a really popular for players like, I'd say 1400 to 1800, and so for them, this book has, for many of them, it's like a Bible. It's like, how do I think about chess? This is how I think about chess. And then they start using those words. Other people haven't even read the book, and then they start using those words. So that's one reason I feel like it has to be on my list there. Okay.
yeah, makes sense.
Oh, always weird that you got to go twice when you're on the snake here. But my next one is Logical Chess by Chernev. And Chernev has got many good books. I'm going to also mention 60 Instructive Games and the Capablanca book. And I think it's giving a real simplicity of storytelling about what chess is about. It's very accessible. And maybe most importantly, it conveys a kind of joy about the beauty of chess. And in our program, this book is actually not only very popular, but when we ran a statistical analysis of what thing in the program produces the most gains, most rating gains, what could it be correlated with? It was this book. And so that's just a fun, it kind of shows the influence of that book. And I would especially say that those books were especially influential, let's say from a rating of like 1,000 to 1,600. And I remember personally, those 60 Instructive Games, I read that probably when I was, 1,300 to 1,400. Great. Fantastic. I read the Capablanca book around that time too. So very influential, especially for, let's call them intermediate players, 1,000 to 1,600. And then I wouldn't necessarily say there's a lot of words that Chernev adds to the vocabulary, or even concepts. That's kind of for higher level books. But in terms of like a joy of chess and how do you approach the game with a basic understanding? How do you get in there? How do you start talking to the pieces? Even though that's something, the talking to the pieces phrase that comes from Rouse. Okay, so that's it for me.
Jesse, I don't want to get off topic, but the thing that produced the most improvement, the task when people did it, wasn't it playing a single classical game?
No, well, that was the first time we did. So we have Dojo 1 we did 2 statistical analyses.
Okay.
And that was the first one, was playing a classical game.
And the second time around, it was reading Chernev.
But it was only for the cohort that it belonged to.
Sure.
Right. So that was I think the 1,100 to 1,200 cohort.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to compare tasks across the whole dojo when there's only one cohort that has it. Okay, cool. Well, I think also, Jesse, that Logical Chess, I saw it mentioned somewhere in the discussion around books that had sold a lot. So I think he was, I think he was indeed quite popular.
Right.
As a writer at the time. Okay, my next book, not too bad yet. It's going to be My System by Nimzovich. Yeah, what can I say? I mean, everybody's heard of it. The people in our chat before the podcast even started were predicting that this book would be in our lists. Um, Me personally, I prefer Chess Praxis, right? But this is not about what we like. This is about what's influential. People think and talk and argue a lot about this book. And from my approach to how I did this book is also kind of like the original book of doing a textbook about chess, right? Like it's the original book of let me make this academic for you, right? This is how bishops work and pawns work and knights work, and I'm organizing my material and all of that. I don't. I'm sure people were making some attempts at it before. You know, we never really know what the first thing is, but as far as standing out in my own knowledge of chess literature, this is kind of the origin of the textbook genre of chess book. Um, Also, a quick note, I saw some people in chat asking about Schachnovelle by Stefan Zweig and some other things. So just to clarify, we're only talking about books that are clearly and literally about chess today.
Right.
So it's nothing about the chess culture or, story, no searching for Bobby Fischer or Queen's Gambit or anything like that.
It's got to have a diagram in the book.
Gotta have some diagrams, some positions, etc. And mainly, like we could even say mainly, right? It has to be mostly something in the direction of nuts and bolts, bishops and pawns, and all that. So yeah, my system. I don't have too much more to say about it. I'll pass it on to you, and I don't think you guys think it's stupid, but
no, definitely a very reasonable choice. Okay, my number 3 is gonna be Fischer's My 60 Memorable Games. And this for me again is kind of it's a little bit, I tried to separate it from, because I think Fischer is like incredibly influential player, but is his book like also influential? And I feel like it is. I think it's very widely read. And of course, Fischer himself did, he inspired like a whole generation of players. I'm sure that read his book. He had a lot of fans in the Soviet Union as well that grew up on his games and probably read his book also. So I could see his book just being widely influential. And I think like Kasparov, he kind of just like advanced the level of chess at the top. Like he was known for also like Kasparov having deep opening preparation and studying like a lot, spending tons of time, being very like competitive at the board, not like accepting quick draws, but having like this very intense fighting spirit. And yeah, definitely felt like he elevated the level of the game. I feel like his book also very influential. So yeah, for me, it was a pretty solid pick.
yeah. Can I say on that book, Kostya, your comment about it influencing a lot of Soviet players? It was reprinted without any publishing rights in the Soviet Union, like immediately, so that all the Soviets could study it, And there's actually several controversies around this book that people reprinted it in ways that Fischer didn't like, or without his permission, or without paying him royalties. That book, Ilyumzhinov, eventually gave Fischer $100,000 like apology / settlement for the Soviet edition of the book that was read, as you guessed, by tons of people.
Interesting.
And for which he had never been able to get a royalty, not a penny. And Fischer had been saying, even in the 90s, I won't play a world championship reunification match against Kasparov until the Russian Chess Federation makes right the royalties on my 60 memorable games that they stole without permission, but at least they could pay me royalties later on. So that thing lingered for 30 years as an issue. And one of the people it influenced was your fourth pick, Kasparov. He said it was one of his most treasured possessions. Was that bootleg Bobby Fischer.
Yeah, actually, I didn't know that. So there you go. Wow, that's fascinating, actually. But yeah. Okay, my number 2 is gonna be again. Actually, I wasn't sure what book to put here. I'm gonna put. I feel like this isn't a book people have read necessarily.
Don't just do it because it's weird, boss.
No. Take some heat off of me, Kostya.
No, it's
Jesse
just.
only has so much fire to go around. Take some of it.
Yeah, it's just because I'm not sure. I'll go with my gut. I'm gonna go with I don't know how to spell it. Achieving the Aim by Botvinnik. And I don't think this book is really well known. I think his better known book is 100 Selected Games, which I would recommend over this book because that one I think is going to be more instructive. But I just feel like in terms of influence, like Botvinnik probably like deserves a lot of credit for, you know, the way we kind of approach the game and try to improve. So for people that aren't in the know, Botvinnik is kind of considered like the patriarch of the Soviet chess school. He started his like specific school that then like raised like Kasparov and Karpov and Kramnik and all these other players. But yeah, he's credited with bringing a very professional approach to high-level chess, like preparing for tournaments, having an exercise regimen, preparing like a narrow repertoire of openings that you're going to play for a tournament, annotating your games, publishing that analysis. So things that are actually like part of our program. It's like come from Botvinnik and like his teachings. So I don't know like exactly like which book gets the credit for his teachings, but I would think like maybe his autobiography kind of explains a lot of his approach, which is what Achieving the Aim is. I think that kind of fits into it. Of course, like I mentioned, his collection, 100 Selected Games, I think is really instructive. It's one of my favorite books, despite being written in descriptive notation. It's one of the few books actually that I suffered through just because I was so interested in reading it. But I feel like, yeah, he gets a lot of credit, you know, for the way that we kind of approach the game today. So that's kind of my thinking on that one.
Yeah, maybe Kostya even specifically like on how we train for the game, right? Like
Yeah.
his book might, or his books might have the biggest influence on the ChessDojo training program, which itself is a reflection of how you, Jesse, and I train both as players and as coaches, you know? So, and that is something that he's widely and I think correctly respected for, is like he made chess training professional, right? Like there were already people playing chess at a professional level before him, right? But he professionalized a lot of the training.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I just want to say a quick word about this book. So 100 Selected Games you will see everywhere, and it's very cheap to come by. You know, I think there's a algebraic version out there. In any case, this book, Achieving the Aim, dude, no, never made it out of the gate. Kind of like Test of Time. You know,
Right.
have I ever seen it at a bookstore? No, never seen it. And I just looked at it. I was trying to buy it, and it was like, no, too expensive. So I think, and by the way, also Botvinnik has he did very extensive notes on all of his world championships, but it's very hard to get those books, very difficult to get them. So there's like, yeah, I don't know why, but that 100 Selected Games, that was the one that really made it out of the gate.
Somehow that broke through. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. Somehow his influence is obviously very, very widely felt. So it's like,
For sure. Yeah.
yeah,
For sure.
Yeah. Okay, so at this point you might see a system to my way of picking. Each of my books is of kind of like a different genre, right? And it's kind of like, for me, an originator of a genre of chess books. My next one is my sort of originator of the genre of tournament books, a genre I enjoy very much. So it is New York, 1889. Oh, sorry, we're using buys, right? By Steinitz. So this is a book I haven't read.
Dude, you can't be telling me this, dude. A book you haven't read.
It's about the influence of the book. I mean, there are people who are influenced by my system who've never read it. So
You're going to tell me, hold on, let's just pause.
Yeah.
You're going to tell me that, remember, you can change your mind, that New York 1889 is more influential than my system. Boss, just take a moment. Just take a moment what you're saying. I know you like to say weird stuff, but this is a little out there, buddy.
Yeah. You're right. I might switch those two on second thought. That might be an improvement. Let me just say the one thing I know about the book that I haven't read, and then we can maybe adjust the order. So I think this was a tournament to determine who would challenge Steinitz for the world championship. Therefore, he wasn't playing. Right? He was like the observer of the tournament. The dude analyzed and annotated, supposedly, I haven't confirmed this, all 432 games played in this tournament. So that is an epic task and achievement. Now that's a real, that's how you found a genre of chess books. All right, let's see. How do I do this? Put it over.
While he's figuring that out, I will also say I've never seen that book at a bookstore. Never heard anyone talk about it. I couldn't tell you if there was a concept in there. The dude said something that people later did. Yeah.
Well, I mean,
was Steinitz himself influential? That's an interesting question. I think the Ink War kind of goes into that a little bit. But anyways, Dave, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, this guy was super influential. He wrote not in like a really friendly teacher kind of way. He wrote in an abrasive, you guys are all idiots kind of way. And here's like the truth of it all. But to me, the most fundamental thing about chess is that it's this kind of like march and clash of ideas, right? It's a large scale dialectic over time as people, try out these ideas. And that's what's really interesting in a game is the clash between your ideas and your opponent's ideas. And Steinitz was a great participant in that clash of ideas. He brought great new ideas and he wrote about them. And in his day and age, articles were more common than books. So his format was a little bit different, just as now we're changing from books to video courses or whatever, video lectures. But that being said, I think his writings here, he's not only founding the genre of tournament books, so, Bronstein, etc., come from this as descendants, right? And Alyekhin's New York 1924, which was more of a book that I have read with great pleasure and that I think of as being one of the greatest chess books, and I put it up there in our episodes on the greatest chess books ever written. But he's also getting people to start arguing, which is what makes people eventually get better at chess, right? He's starting arguments, and I think that's great. I love arguments.
And we're still arguing 135 years later.
Still arguing now. He started another one just now. Bam. So I'll just say within the genre here of New York 1889, right? The tournament book from 1953 by Bronstein, Zurich 1953. That's a book that I read had over 300,000 copies sold just in the Soviet Union domestically then. So that's a book that probably has pretty high sales worldwide. And that and Alyekhin's book are the two great descendants of New York 1889. Are you appeased that I moved it down to third, Jesse, or is that not?
We're going to talk about our arguments in a second. So let me just finish my list, and then I can tell you why you're wrong.
Okay.
Okay, buddy. So to me, the last two, well, the number one is absolutely uncontroversial. But let's first do number two. So where's my little list here? So number two is Tal Botvinnik, 1960. For sure. Well, I feel pretty strongly about that. 1960. And came out, I believe, in 1961. And this book was, actually, I should say, it's kind of, maybe it should be obvious, but I'm just going to put it in there, by Tall, 1961. So this book, interesting for a variety of reasons and just how it came out. And then I would say, I'm going to put it this way. It's one of these books that was so well written that it ends up having resonance across the generations and then influences the way people think about chess a lot. So, and in some ways, its influence you could say is a little bit in tandem with My Life in Games. It's a bigger book. I don't think there's not as much drama in this book because it's about the match. But anyways, a lot of people will mention that as their favorite Tall book or something like that. But the book that influenced them, so it kind of goes along with that book. So why do I feel it's so influential? First, it's hilarious, and it's hilarious on both a deep level and just a superficial level. Like there's talk about a knight using the square A5 as a trampoline. There's the bishops that are smiling at the white king. And these are phrases that are funny, but they're also incredibly useful in thinking about the narrative of what's going on in a chess game. And so for one, how do we create attacking chances? The book is massive for people developing how they think about the attack. Also really interesting because it's the first book, I think, that really acknowledges a player's failings. Like before you're reading books, you kind of, even today, you'll get this kind of objective sounding thing of like, this was a mistake, this was better, but they don't give you an insight into what was going on with your thinking. And dude is very clear. He's like, oh, I missed that. Missed this other thing. Totally missed this one, And so you have this vision suddenly as an amateur of like, oh, well, this guy isn't superhuman. He is making mistakes. This whole edifice of like, top chess players being these priests of high knowledge. No, he's just coming down to earth. He's breaking it all the way down. And also explaining how he found the beautiful moves. And so what I want to say is when I was a kid, it wasn't necessarily the case that you found that book everywhere. So what I'm trying to say is like it was influential, but then it kind of kept on getting rediscovered. So for example, Silman was like, oh yeah, that's the best chess book ever written. And then other people start saying that as well. I put it in my top 3 of best chess books ever written. And so it keeps spinning. And because Tall is so fascinating, even for amateur players, the way he plays, boom, it's like fantastically influential. Another quick thing, he gives the times in the game times. So how much did Botvinnik spend, which also was like really the first book to do that. Very interesting. Not many books after that have done it. And it tells a story. Just like in our dojo, we now have the time graph. Mm-hmm. It tells a story. Okay. I feel like number one, absolutely not even a question. If you don't have this as your top book of most influential, you are wrong. I'm just going to tell you you're wrong. So this is My System by Nimzovich.
My System, damn.
It's not even close.
Never would have guessed.
Not even close. So let me just say,
I thought this was going to be number 2 on your list, Kostya.
A lot of people hate this book, especially people who are new to the game now, because it feels like it's written in an older time and people aren't finding it as accessible. But when we talk about influence, it's like you're lost if you don't realize the power of this book. Because the words that you use, even if you hate the book, refuse to read it, they're all Nimzo's words, okay? When he's talking about prophylaxis, dude, that is a huge topic for chess. It continues to be a massive thing, Nimzovich. When he starts talking about how do you play against the Isolani, Nimzovich. When he talks about the blockade, Nimzovich. When he's talking about how to use tempo, pawn moves aren't tempo moves, Nimzovich, all these really basic things, the outpost, it's all there.
Creating
It's
a
all
weakness.
creating weakness, having two weaknesses, using one
Alternating
against another,
maneuvers.
alternating. Dude, it's all there. So to me, it's like, no, there's no other book that even comes close as the influence. And I'll just say, there's so much hatred for this book because new players can't understand it. And so we at the dojo did a controversial thing. We're like, even though that's the most influential book, and in a certain sense, if you don't read it, you don't have a sense of chess history in terms of, let's call it chess conceptual history. We just didn't want it to be so polarizing, right? Mm-hmm. So we pulled it out. But let's just say, I mean, all the concepts are there, and if you don't want to read it, fine. But I'm just telling you, if you want to have a sense of like where the concepts come from, it's that book.
Yeah.
All right, there's my rant over.
Yeah. Or if you get all your advice from some weird dude on Twitter, you can read Secrets of Modern Chess Strategy instead.
That's right.
Okay. Well, Jesse, you made a good case for it. And I was less convinced of the case you made for Tal at number 2. I mean, you know that Mikhail Tal is one of my 3 favorite chess authors, and that I love both books you mentioned from him. But I didn't know to what extent Tal's books. I mean, I consider them amazing, but I'm not certain how much they've influenced other people. So I don't know with certainty, but my system, sure. I mean, everybody talks about it. So, all right. So my top one, Analyse de la partie des échecs by Philidor. No, I'm just kidding. See, Jesse, I don't do these things just to mess with you. I give my serious answer. It just sometimes gets you. Okay, my real answer, and this one here, it has a really long title, so I'm not going to be able to type it in here. But it's called Book of the Liberal Invention and Art of the Game of Chess. That's the full name. I'm just going to call it book. The way the Polgar book is just called chess. I'm just going to call it book. By Ruy Lopez. And I think this book is really a predecessor to Analyse by Philidor. And therefore, it's more influential. Because Philidor's book comes from it, and other books come from Philidor. And what this book is it's kind of like the first quality book of chess analysis that we have. It's a treatise. It's the art of analyzing things, and it's also an early opening book. So folks predicted I would have no opening books on my list. Folks were wrong. This is an opening book, in part. And it really just sort of like opens up the whole idea of writing chess books, partly. And,
Boss, have you read this book?
No, it's another book I haven't read. Now, there was a book published shortly before this by Damiano, which is much less well done or thorough. And I think Ruy Lopez was partly inspired by how bad Damiano's book was to write his book. So even though this isn't the first book that I know of, it's maybe like the third book or so that I know of, I'm putting it at the top. There we go.
I think I've heard of this book. I think I've heard of it.
Come on, you must have heard of it, of course.
I'll be honest, I hadn't totally heard of New York 1889. I wasn't aware of its existence for...
Yeah, I don't think David was either until he Googled what are some old chess books that people read back in the day.
Yeah, these two I haven't read.
So you're saying this Ruy Lopez book is influential because it started off all other chess books from there?
In a sense, it's almost like, what's the English word for déclencher? It's like, it's like opening the floodgates of chess literature, right? Like it's giving people the idea like that you can analyze chess, that you can prepare your openings, right? That you can, and it wasn't like absolutely the first, right? When Jesse was saying that we've got 500-year history of chess, literature at the beginning. We actually have literature on shatranj, right? We have little scraps of manuscripts that go back like 1,000 years. And sometimes you've got an analysis in Arabic of like a rook versus knight endgame that still holds to this day, you know, or an actual like endgame study that the piece that includes pieces that still move that way. And, you know, so there is stuff that goes even further back. And I'm not saying we can always know exactly, but this is like a really big one that sort of modernized chess literature and publishing and stuck around. I think it inspired Philidor's treatise, which I think has had a huge influence. And I think my system from Nimzovich, honestly, sort of like in some ways comes from some of the work that Philidor did. And it's a descendant of that. So yeah, I when I came into this, I didn't have this set of books in mind.
Keeping it weird, boss. Keeping it weird. Yeah.
I was thinking stuff like, you know, Fischer Boom and Kasparov, but these are a little bit like they're my era, you know, like they firsthand impacted me, right? But maybe something written 10 years later is more influential, but it didn't hit me, right? And maybe something earlier is more influential, but I wasn't there. So I tried to sort of think about it more across time and what led to what, and this idea that your influence is carried on and the influence of your students, et cetera, thereafter. And so I think this one is a good one. And also the most popular kind of chess book, period, are opening books. I don't like them, but this is, you know, the parent of that stuff.
I think Chess Zebra in the chat has the best comeback to you, dog. He's like, this book didn't even influence David. You know? That's definitely true of this New York 1889 thing.
It influenced me if Philidor wrote his book because of this book. And now I have this concept of playing as if pawns were the soul of chess. You know, Jesse, even before I'd ever read a chess book, I was playing the Philidor defense. I invented it on my own with the idea not only of playing d6 to protect my e5 pawn and create the pawn chain, but I was playing f5 to set up a head duo and to expand in the direction of my pawn chain. Philidor's counter gambit or whatever it was, right? And yeah.
All right, Kostya, take us out of here.
See, this is why I think tier lists are cool, because if we were doing a tier list, you know, Dave would propose this book, me and Jesse would be like C tier, and then that would be the average would work itself out. Yeah, I mean, it's just a different way of looking at things. I think it's a logical choice, because it did kind of influence chess books from there. How much it influenced chess books, I have no idea. And how much credit we should give to the past, it's hard to say. Anyways, I'm going to adjust my second pick. I think instead of achieving the aim, I think I will go with Botvinnik's 100 selected games just as my choice. Because I actually remember reading that one. And I do remember him talking about his process in that book as well. And like Jesse, I think Jesse made a good point. That one actually hit the public and ranks a bit more and gets like, you know, sold in bookstores and stuff. So I feel like that was actually the more influential of the books. Okay, and then my first one, top pick, I'm going with My System by Aaron Nimzovich. The classic.
Somebody was talking about that recently.
Yeah, someone brought this book up. I just feel like, you know, a lot of, chess conceptual thinking about strategy started with My System, and he definitely put a lot of concepts on the paper that we now use, stuff like the blockade, and Jesse mentioned prophylaxis and controlling squares and making exchanges and maneuvers and all this stuff. Is it the most effective book one should read like when they're starting out? Like I'm not really sure about that. Is it super interesting and influential when it comes to like chess culture and history? I would say yes. Should someone read it if they want like a better understanding of like chess history and chess culture? I would also say yes. Is it necessary to read if you want to become a strong player? I would say no. Like there's a lot of books that cover kind of the same ground, but those books are kind of built off of what I would understand as like concepts that come from Nimzo himself, even if he was a bit too dogmatic and all this stuff, I do think, yeah, his work definitely has influenced, stuff for, 100 years since. So, yeah.
But one
there you
thing
have
that's
it.
interesting about this list that we created is in contrast to our other lists. We've done so many lists of best books, best problem books. We've done so many things. But this one has the least amount of repeats. So, for example, the only books that are repeated are My System and Reassess Your Chess. That's it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Oof.
yeah, so it's good. The point scoring is going to be a little bit, there's going to be a big tie for third place, out there.
Yeah. And honestly, I was a little bit surprised by your guys' choices of my great of reassess your chess. I mean, not to like insult the choice or something like that, but it did surprise me a little bit.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't even see how we grade this. So, like, My System is a clear first.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's even number 2? Because if it was based
Reassess
on...
Your Chess is going to win by points, I assume.
Well, if we assign 1 point for
maybe
fifth
it won't,
place...
actually. I'll tell you what, you just do our normal thing, and there'll be some ties and stuff after 2 through whatever.
From what I can tell, because we're giving 5 points, right, for a first place pick.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So that means that My System gets first place. Second
Right.
place goes to Book by Rui Lopez.
Yeah.
And then third place is going to be a
dude.
tie between Tal Botvinnik 1960 and Botvinnik's 100 selected games. Just
David,
kind of
you
funny
can
that
take
it's
it
a
back,
tie.
dude. You can take it back. It's not too late.
It's just how...
Are you sure? Can you take it back, dude?
I think
Damn.
I believe in it according to my system here.
When you said believe it, I thought you were going to say, I think I blew it.
No. No, I think I got it right.
Okay.
Okay.
I think 5 was such a short list, If the list were longer, there might be some more overlap.
Yeah,
I
let's
think
do
that's
some
the thing.
honorable mentions, because there were some
Because-
books that were...
Okay. How about
We
each
used to do
person
like
gets
10. We used to do lists of 10 often, right? That would be one of the reasons we had more overlap.
Yeah.
How about each person gets to do 3 and they each get a point or something like that? How about that? So each person gets to do 3.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it'll affect the standings much.
It
but...
will, because I'll probably I'm going to name some things that might be in there.
Oh,
David
I see. Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, let me think about... One of mine was definitely going to be, I think, Zurich 1953. It's definitely one I wanted on the list, but couldn't make it on.
I mean, I know for sure what my next one would have been, basically. It was going to be one of 2 Fisher books. And when I set out to do this, I assumed like one of the Fisher books was going to be first or second for me, honestly.
Yeah.
I was hesitating between Bobby Fischer Teaches Chess, with supposedly maybe the most sold book of all time, 1 million+ copies, whatever, and My 60 Memorable Games, which has more of an influence on chess culture, right? And like stronger chess players. Right. Whereas the other book just got out there and hit so many people. But when I was first thinking about this, I was thinking in terms of like, the Soviet era, the Fisher boom. I was thinking stuff like that as being super influential. So my 6th pick, if you guys want an overlap, we could call it My 60 Memorable Games. That'll be my next one down the list.
Ooh, that's a point for me. Nice.
It would be a point for you.
Could you maybe expand it to 8, and then the final list will be 5, but we'll just expand this list to 8 on our doc, and then we can all put our business in.
Okay. Yeah.
So David, you want to do the math? I know you're good at this, adding it all up. Zip, zip, zip.
Sure. I can start working on the math. If we've got an overlap on Kasparov, but with different books, should we combine the point?
I mean, dude, there couldn't be a bigger difference in terms of style, presentation, thought between My Great Predecessor. By the way, it's a nasty book. It's a nasty book. Filled with computer analysis. And Test of Time, which didn't get an audience, but is one of the greatest books of all time.
Yeah. And do you want me to count it 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 1, 1 or 8, 7, 6, 5, 4?
Let's go with that 8 thing. Yeah.
8, 7, 6, etc.
There you go, buddy.
Okay. All right. I'll go do some arithmetic while you guys entertain people. Jesse, maybe you want to insult me for a moment while I'm doing this?
Sure. By the way, some people are asking, is 1953 the Bronstein or the Najdorf? It's, the book by Najdorf might well be good, but it was never even close as influential as the Bronstein book. And this is by Laszlo Polgar, not by Susan Polgar. Thank you very much. Jeez. And while David's doing that, I'll just say that book's interesting. It's interesting how I kind of just like David. I had I was already an IM when I discovered the book, and I was like, this is for lower rated chumps. What is this all about? And so David's still too proud. He still hasn't studied it. But then I realized how powerful it was through teaching others. Really, I was using it as a teaching tool, and then I realized how powerful it was for myself. And then it happened before our program, but I would say when we put it out in the program, that was one of the things that was really interesting because it snowballed and people were realizing how much it was helping them with visualization. And then, even people who weren't in the program started being turned on to it by Twitter or whatever. So it had this incredible viral effect that went out. And I'll say what David's calculating too, that I had a great read when I was a kid of Zurich 1953. I don't think when I tried to reread it, I didn't have the same pull for me, but there's just no doubt. I mean, that book was, when you talk to people at a tournament, back in the day and you say like, well, what should I read? They'd be like 1953, son. It's 1953 that you got to read, And so that book gave you, I guess what you could say is how to approach certain kinds of positions, right? He was able to put it in words kind of clearly for that time. Kind of like my system, newer readers are just like, they can't take it, they just freak out. Freak out when you even read. I mean, my system, for all other books, is the most polarizing, but there's a little bit going on with that with 1953 as well.
I think that the overlaps are still only about 3 books that are up here at the top.
We're just doing our best here, boss.
Right. Okay. I'm just telling you, like there's a little more overlap, but it's not tons.
It's not too late for you to take Ruy Lopez out.
Yeah, maybe there should be an overlap. I'll just say that, so my honorable mentions were Zurich 1953, because I think that's like a great tournament book and so many players have read it. I also added Dvoretsky's Endgame Manual, because I feel like Dvoretsky is an extremely influential author, and he's definitely influenced a lot, like a generation of very, very strong players. I don't know which one of his books to really credit, but the Endgame Manual is definitely considered one of the best endgame books of all time. So I just put that one. And then I put Lasker's E-Manual of Chess just as a joke, because I just thought that was really funny. But no, my 8th pick is actually My Best Games by Alekhine. I thought David made a good case for it, and I have heard that book being very widely read among a lot of players, especially like Soviet players. And I feel like that's one of the first, one of the first like game collections of like world champions that's like really like good and highly regarded. So yeah, for me, deserves an honorable mention as well.
Well,
you got to change it though, because David's doing the points and he's going to want you to have that on there.
No, I got it. I was able to follow that.
All right.
So we got the final rankings here. Top 3 most influential chess books. Here we go. 3rd place, Reassess Your Chess, 9 points. 2nd place, My 60 Marble Games, 12 points. And 1st place, My System, 23 points.
That's a pretty good list. I like too, Kostya, that just kind of impromptu. You called it audible, and it's like the way that we can get rid of book is just make it top 3. Just make it top 3. We don't need any of this stuff.
Well, I feel like if we don't have choices that overlap, it's kind of pointless.
Okay.
So those are the 3 books that at least we had some overlap. So that's cool.
Yeah,
Okay.
I understand in these situations, Kostya, like your thought about the tier list, but I also think there's something about a top list for certain things, where you want to say this is the top 1, the top 2. So
Yeah, for sure.
there's both possible approaches to it.
Yes.
I think the more we added, right? Like when we go to 8, when we go to 10, when we go to 12, we'll find more and more overlap, and oddball choices, whoever might have made them, will slowly go down in the totals, right? So if you added 2 more rows, at some point someone else is going to give a point to 100 selected games, right? Like it's coming pretty soon for Jesse or me. It's going to crop up, right? And then that one would sort of get boosted up a little bit. So yeah.
Yeah. There you have it. Okay, good list. Leave your comments on YouTube. As usual. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time. See y'all.